I ask for your grace now in anticipation that our service this morning is likely to continue for more than the usual 60 minutes. Not too much more, but if you find that you need to leave, we understand, but we truly hope that you'll be able to stay with us for the full service. As Penny told us, March 8th is International Women's Day this year. And on that day, many governmental entities, nonprofit organizations, and educational institutions recognize the vital role of women in society. This recognition is all the more poignant this morning as we have been seeing the role that Ukrainian women are playing in getting their families to safety, while their husbands, fathers, brothers, cousins, and friends pick up arms to resist the ongoing brutal Russian invasion. So I think it's appropriate to spend this Sunday exploring one of the most comprehensive images of womanhood in the Bible, the Proverbs 31 woman, Eshet Chayil. The poem comes at the end of the book of Proverbs, as I said earlier. It's important to note that Proverbs is thought to be the oldest existing example of the Hebrew wisdom movement, whose founding is commonly attributed to King Solomon. Though scholars differ as to when Proverbs was written, a commonly accepted date is 1000 BCE, which would make it about 3,000 years old. The wisdom tradition was developed by the professional sages or wise men and scribes in the service of the court. It consisted primarily of the maxims about practical, intelligent ways to conduct one's life. It also included from time to time discussions, speculations about the very worth and meaning of human life. Proverbs is a book of wisdom sayings and moral instructions directed toward a group of young men who are expected to become the social and political leaders of their people. While everyone can find pearls of wisdom in Proverbs, you can tell from the language that the entire book was written assuming that it would be read by those young men and only those young men. This poem, coming as it does at the end of the book of Proverbs, describes to them the type of life partner they may be worthy of if they live according to the principles laid out in Proverbs. So you may be asking yourself, what could a poem about a woman written almost 3,000 years ago have to say that would be remotely relevant to or applicable to women today? Well, I'll tell you. I grew up in a traditional household where my mother's place was primarily in the home, taking care of her children and her husband. My father's place was primarily outside the home, earning a living and participating in civic affairs. My mother was very involved in the church, but she didn't take part in any public speaking or any political activities. That was left up to my father. As a young woman eager to leave the nest and find my place in the world, I had a hard time finding female role models that did not conform to my mother's paradigm of womanhood. All the books, magazines, news articles, and radio talk shows at that time emphasized how difficult, if not impossible, it was for a woman to be a devoted and loving spouse and parent while also actively participating in the world beyond the home. This was something of a backlash to the women's movement in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. As a teenager in Sunday school, I was rarely taught about Bible stories where women were the main character. On those rare occasions when I was, the emphasis was always on their roles as good wives and mothers, never astute businesswomen or scholars or political leaders. So imagine my surprise when I first met the Proverbs 31 woman as an adult student of biblical literature. I mean, really met her. I had heard about her in those Mother's Day sermons that just talked about her being such a good wife and never critically looked at the actual language of the poem. So the poem spoke to me over the millennia and gave me permission to be all the things that I wanted to be: a partner, a mother, a teacher, a lawyer, and now a pastor. While the current translations of this Hebrew poem provide an inspiring picture of womanhood, still rife with word choices that work to diminish her and place her squarely within the modern patriarchy's comfort zone. Let's take a closer look at the poem and you'll see what I mean. A good wife, who can find? She is far more precious than jewels. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will have no lack of gain. She does him good and not harm all the days of her life. The phrase Eshet Chayil has often been translated by biblical translators with an emphasis on her role as wife, including capable wife, wife of noble character, perfect wife, excellent wife, and wife with a strong character. The English translation of Eshet is straightforward. It means woman in general, not wife or mother or maidservant, but woman, every woman, any woman. Woman without regard to any limiting role or status. Hebrew has another word which has meant wife, Isha. Adam is Ish, Eve is Isha. While becoming a wife was normative in those days, just as it remains today, I contend that the translators have done us a disservice by imposing the role or status of wife onto Eshet Chayil, as though all women aren't able to embody the characteristics of an Eshet Chayil, only married ones or only ones with children. I submit that the translations in which Eshet has become wife are imposing onto the text the gender and social location of the translators, who are, let's face it, mostly accomplished white male biblical scholars. In the context of this poem, the meaning of Chayil is not so straightforward. In Hebrew, Chayil is a masculine noun, most commonly used in association with describing some positive characteristics of men in leadership positions, such as a man of valor, or a great leader, or a man who's wealthy and brave and leads well. In this case, valor is the English translation for Chayil. One of the challenges of translating ancient languages is that they are compact. That is, one Hebrew word may have several nuanced meanings depending on the context. So one biblical Hebrew word may legitimately be translated by several different but related English words. Sometimes insisting on one English word as the equivalent to one Hebrew word fails to capture the full meaning of the Hebrew word in context. So according to the Hebrew dictionary, the one all the scholars refer to, written by Messrs. Brown, Driver, and Briggs, Chayil may mean strength, efficiency, wealth, valor, and moral worth. So with regard to Eshet Chayil, I submit that the best translation is a powerful, capable, wise, and wealthy woman. I support my expanded translation by referring to the stanzas of the poem itself, and I hope as we go through, you will see why she is powerful, capable, wise, and wealthy. She seeks wool and flax and works with willing hands. She's like the ships of the merchant. She brings her food from afar. She rises while it is yet night and provides food for her household and tasks for her maidens. Here we find the depiction of an industrious woman not afraid of doing whatever needs to be done. She leads by example. She doesn't demand that her staff do anything that she herself is not willing to do. And apparently she lives by the old adage, early to bed, early to rise, makes a woman wealthy and wise. Now, I have to admit that there's one verse in this poem that gives me pause. I don't know what to make of the imagery. She is like the ships of the merchant. She brings her food from afar. I invite you to share in the chat box any ideas you may have about what this verse is getting at. Remember, this is a poem celebrating womanhood. In that context, I'm interested in hearing what you have to say. She considers a field and buys it. With the fruit of her hands, she plants a vineyard. She girds her loins with strength and makes her arms strong. Here we may understand that Eshet Chayil, without her husband's involvement, assesses the value of a field and purchases it with her own financial resources. Eshet Chayil is wealthy in her own right. Whether inherited wealth or earned wealth, the wealth is hers. And given how industrious she is, we can imagine that whatever financial resources she brought into the marriage, they have increased through her efforts. Here we also see that Eshet Chayil is not only well-equipped financially, she's also physically strong. She girds her loins and strengthens her arms. From this, we may understand that she intentionally takes actions that will increase her physical strength. Eshet Chayil works out. She perceives that her merchandise is profitable. Her lamp does not go out at night. She puts her hands to the distaff and her hands hold the spindle, and she opens her hands to the poor and reaches out her hands to the needy. Eshet Chayil is a successful businesswoman. Some women hear this poem as an indictment against women. Hear these verses, especially the part, her lamp does not go out at night, matched with she puts her hands to the distaff and her hands hold the spindle, as an admonition to never stop working. I have another equally valid and I think more realistic interpretation. I pair her lamp does not go out at night with the preceding line, she perceives that her merchandise is profitable, and return to Eshet Chayil's financial resources. In other words, she has earned enough money that she doesn't have to worry about her lamp going out at night. It's a statement of luxury and of more than enough, rather than an exhortation to never cease working. And having more than enough, she shares what she has with the poor and the needy. She is not afraid of snow for her household, for all her household are clothed in scarlet. She makes herself coverings. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. Her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land. She makes linen garments and sells them. She delivers girdles to the merchant. Strength and dignity are her clothing, and she laughs at the time to come. These verses continue in that same vein and show that there are enough financial resources created by Eshet Chayil's efforts that her entire family is protected from the cold. They aren't wearing any old rags. They're wearing some of the rarest and most expensive materials in their day, linen and anything colored purple. And she's not relegated to the domestic realm. What she and her staff produce, she sells by engaging in commerce with the merchants who will resell her goods to the public. She and her staff are engaging in public acts of commerce. She laughs at the time to come because she and her family are well provisioned. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. She looks well to the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praises her. Many women have done excellently, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Here, Eshet Chayil is praised for her wisdom and kindness and good relations with her children and husband who appreciate her. Do not be turned off by the phrase, a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. In its time, the phrase was used to describe all people who respected the wisdom teachings thought to have originated with God. Fear in this case doesn't mean motivated by fear, but rather motivated by respect. Usually because the person so motivated is wise enough to understand the ethical reasoning attributed to God's commandments. Give her of the fruit of her hands and let her works praise her in the gates. Here in the United States, all I have to say is, Lilly Ledbetter, anyone? And everyone gets it. Lilly Ledbetter's wage discrimination case made it all the way to the US Supreme Court, and she lost. Her loss motivated the US Congress to enact the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act of 2009 to rectify a loophole in the existing employment laws. In her welcome this morning, Penny noted that women still earn 23% less than men for comparable work and occupy only 24% of parliamentary seats worldwide. In the United States, our Congress is made up of 27% women and 73% men. What is most notable about this still skewed ratio is that 27% represents a whopping 50% increase in women serving in Congress in a country where 50.8% are women. 50.8% women in the country, but only 27% women in Congress. We still have much work to do to achieve balanced gender representation. There are many factors that play into why this is so and why there's a pay gap, including, among other things, that our binary world, people working in what have been jobs traditionally associated with women, such as teachers, daycare workers, and nurses, are paid less than people working in jobs traditionally associated with men, regardless of gender. But note how important these jobs are, how significant they are to our society, and how impactful they are to the development and well-being of children and adults. Again, teachers, daycare workers, and nurses are paid less than people working in jobs traditionally associated with men. Also, more women than men tend to work in part-time positions without any paid benefits, largely because they're shouldering the responsibility for the household and for raising children if there are any, or perhaps for taking care of elderly parents. So in order to compare apples to apples, we can compare the annual earnings of full-time workers. On this basis, women workers in the United States earned an average of 84 cents for every dollar earned by men in 2020. Also, on the basis of hourly pay of full-time working women to those of men, the median hourly wage for a man in 2016 was $15.67, while the same measure for a woman was, man was $18.94, while the same measure for a woman was only $15.67. This gender pay gap contributes to women's poverty, health concerns, and barriers to leaving abusive relationships. Now, remember how this poem opens with a rhetorical question? Translation teams, almost always composed of male biblical scholars, have translated the question this way: a capable wife who can find. Does that sound as insulting to you as it does to me? Doesn't that make it seem like capable wives are hard to find? If that's so, then it must be the case that most wives are not capable, right? Well, once again, I think the translators, not the biblical text, are showing their social location and male privilege. The word that's been translated as find in the Hebrew is the Hebrew word yemsa, which comes from the root word matzah, whose standard meaning, according to the Hebrew dictionary, are attain to or find. They're also related to the English words secure or acquire. Since chapters 1 through 30 of Proverbs were written to certain young men living at the king's court, preparing to be leaders in their respective communities, I contend that Proverbs 31 was also written for them as an incentive to adhere to the admonitions and words of wisdom imparted in chapters 1 through 30. The question is not a capable woman who can find, but rather a powerful, capable, wise, and wealthy woman who can attain to, or who can secure or acquire, who can hope to marry such a woman. The unspoken answer is only young men who live according to the lessons they learned in the preceding 30 chapters of Proverbs are worthy of such a woman. My translation choice takes away the insult and makes the poem not a depiction of an impossibly ideal woman, as some commentators have suggested, but rather a challenge to young men to live lives that would make them worthy of such a partner. And once having attained such a partner, the ancient Jewish practice of reciting the poem every Friday night would reinforce the young man's understanding and appreciation for all that his partner in life does for him. Care for their children, manage their household, create wealth, invest wisely, teach wisdom, and model compassion and generosity, to name only a few. On this point, a modern observant Jewish woman in the Reconstructionist movement has shared her understanding of the poem online. She understands it as being in praise of all the strong, capable, industrious, wealthy, and wise women in her life, as well as herself. Contemplating the traditional Sabbath custom where her father sang this poem to her mother every Shabbat meal, every time Shabbat meal began on Friday night, she says, "I remember well Shabbat evenings around our family table. When it came time for my father to sing Eshet Chayil, my mother, the proud feminist, wanted the song. Every word of it. She worked hard. The bags under her eyes were dark. A 3-course meal was ready in the kitchen, even though she'd left her office an hour before. She wanted the song. Yes, she knew the words, written by men of another time. Eshet Chayil didn't exactly describe her own sense of the way things should be, but it was there. 2 minutes built into the traditional Friday night ritual that were just for her. 2 minutes when she could sit back and close her eyes and feel that all her efforts were appreciated. Yes, 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 she thought. I deserve a song. Ms. Moem has written a poem for International Women's Day that is often used in services or celebrations and gatherings in honor of International Women's Day. The poem goes, "Today is a celebration for women all around the world, women who've dared to dream big ever since they were little girls, for the diversity and talents that lie within a feminine heart, for the courage and determination that prevents us falling apart. We can raise families and build businesses and be proud of all we've achieved, where once over visions of that scale could never have been believed. Women, stand up and be counted, smile at how far we have come, and cherish every single day, whether daughter, wife, or mom. Don't let anyone tell you that there are set paths for you to follow, as a little girl with a dream is an inspiring woman of tomorrow. So celebrate all women and acknowledge the great things they do, and tell a woman close to your heart just how much she means to you."